Good morning and welcome to Food for Thought. I'd like to talk about being a presence this morning, and I'd like to start by telling you a story. It's a story of a family who a number of years ago were preparing to become missionaries overseas, and they were in another city away from their home city and preparing. And while they were doing that, one of their daughters, who was 17 years old at the time, was having some health issues, having headaches and not feeling well, and then vomiting and just really not having a good time of it. So they took her to the doctors, and the doctor said, well, look, she's probably just missing her own hometown and her friends and so on, so maybe you ought to rethink this and send her back to her hometown and, get her back with her school friends and things might improve. Well, they did that, but 3 months later, suddenly she was seriously ill, and they called an ambulance and they rushed her off to hospital, and they discovered that she had a brain tumour. It was inside a cyst, and they decided that it needed to be operated on. And the staff were really helpful at the hospital. They were so understanding and in terms of explaining what was going on to both the daughter and also to their parents. And thankfully, the operation went ahead. It was operable, and 99.9% of the tumour was removed. And during that time, the family had moved back to their home city with the daughter, and all this happened, and they just begun attending a new church. And the church didn't know them from a bar of soap. But the wonderful thing about the church was that they had embraced them and prepared meals during this time and had started praying for their daughter and offered a kind of presence that was reminiscent of the presence of the Holy Spirit in terms of being a practical help, but also very prayerful and caring and loving community in which they could tap into. I know this family well because it was our family, and it was my daughter that was involved in that. And we were just amazed at the kind of attention that we were given, both from the hospital side of things, but also from the church community. And I think it's a really important thing for us as a church and as Christians in churches to offer that kind of a tuning presence to those who are in need, because we know, and recently we've had Steve McCracken speak to us about the importance of going into the community to take the truth about Jesus to people, and about us following Christ in the way we live and growing in our love for one another, and also glowing to be the light that shines in amongst the darkness and all the sad things that happen to us as we do life, everyday life in the world we live in. But as I was reflecting on this, I thought the golden rule of Jesus that we find in Matthew 7:12 is really at the heart of what that church community a number of years ago was putting into practice. And the New Living Translation puts it this way, that Jesus said, "Do to others whatever you would like them to do to you." And as I reflected on that, I thought there were 5 key values that we could take on board as followers of Christ that we could put into practice in those relationships that we seek to build up as we try to bring the gospel of Christ to people. The first one is hospitality. Hospitality is very important. We need to be hospitable to people. We need to open up our homes, open up our lives to them in such a way that they can gain some confidence in us, that we are interested in them as people. The second one's compassion, that we could show compassion in their circumstances as they tell us about their life and their hardships, as they get to know us, that we could show that kind of compassion with them as they're going through their tough times. Another one's justice. We need to stand up for what is right, and if they're going through a hard time because some injustice is being done towards them, then we need to help them address that, to see that. Of course, during all this, we need to be respectful, don't we? So another value is respect. And finally, excellence. In our relationship with them, we need to maintain the excellence that indeed is very important in relationships with people, that we treat them very well, as if they're the most important person at the time, giving them our full attention as we share with them. So how do we do that? I want to just briefly, in the time remaining, go through the what and the why and the how, as we seek to take the gospel as Christ's ambassadors to others. The first one I think we could sum up by saying the need for therapeutic relationships. See, we're all about relationships these days, and on the internet with social media we can strike up those kind of relationships, but they're not probably what we would call therapeutic ones. That is, where there's interaction to a deep level, face to face, where we can read someone's facial expressions, we can see the sadness in their eyes, that kind of thing. We need to hear their backstory, and everyone has a backstory and wants to be seen. Everyone wants to be heard. Everyone wants to have our undivided attention. And so, as Christians, we too should aim to meet people where they're at, connect meaningful with them, help them to transition or to prepare for what might just be ahead of them, whether it be a good experience or a not so good experience. Well, why do we do that? Well, we've kind of said our purpose as followers of Christ is to help people, ultimately to lead them to Christ, but also to help them in practical ways. So help them with their circumstances. Some may be in difficult circumstances, so some sort of practical help we could give, or to help them to understand the meaning of the challenge that they seem to be going through, what the problem they're going through, that maybe it's an illness, maybe they've been through a situation where they've been injured either physically or emotionally, and to enable them to take ownership for their own healing too. Because ultimately each one of us needs to take ownership for our healing, whatever shape or form that may take. Thirdly, how do we do this? Well, we've got to do it with authenticity, don't we? We need to be genuine like Jesus was genuine. We need to be ourselves as Jesus has made us to be, so that we can develop those real connections with one another. And we need to be that, have that attuned presence as we meet with them, to help them to wonder what is happening in their lives, to follow with them the story, to hold them in their times of challenge and facing the unknown perhaps. We need to acknowledge and address their feelings. Are they going through times where there's great pain emotionally or physically? Is it a fearful time? Are they in a stage of grief? Are they feeling powerless? And we need to do that, of course, without judgment or correction. Very tempting to want to jump in and correct people, but when they're feeling hard done by, perhaps that's not the right time for us to do any correction. And finally, we're to offer and share how Christ is ready to meet them in that situation. There does come a time, in my experience, that people are open to the message of hope that the gospel brings, that Jesus brings. And in all this, we can see that the mess of life, Jesus made it quite clear. Our basic principle is, and it's back to where we started, we are to treat one another exactly the way we ourselves would like to be treated. I hope that's been of practical help to you as you seek to come to terms with what it means to be a follower of Christ. If you're not a follower of Christ, can I encourage you to pick up the Gospel of Matthew and have a read. Matthew chapter 7 is a good one. I've just quoted from that today, and I hope that will bring you a great blessing as you do that. So thank you for joining us, and may God bless you.